All right, everyone, welcome back into another props video. Going to be touching on the top prop bets for week 5. And guys, right off the bat, we're going to have some pretty nice edges. So let's go ahead and start out with those. And so one of the more frustrating things for me as like a PrizePicks underdog props content creator, if you will, is that a lot of the times where we are getting these massive edges, like we currently have with Tutu Atwell and Colby Parkinson, is that PrizePicks and or underdog has been updating these and pushing these to, in this instance, it'd be 4 for the receptions prop line because we are getting a massive edge on them. Thus, lately, they've been just bumping those instantly or turning these into a goblin prop bet to the point where you are not gaining a long-term edge on them. Now, thankfully, we still have fantasy score prop bets. INT prop bets have been pretty good. Kicking prop bets have been pretty good. We have a bunch of prop bets that we can still get an edge on, but receptions props and some other ones, we haven't seen that as much. And so I bring that up because these two have been here for like a day and a half now. They have not been bumped at all, and I'm not really sure why they haven't been bumped just yet. Maybe PrizePicks knows something that we don't know. I will say the projection data doesn't like the over for either of these two. That's part of the equation as well. But let's go ahead and show you guys why these are so crazy. So this is on the 9to5 props tab under the 9to5 NFL DFS cheat sheet. Hopefully, I'll make this into a separate tab just for people that just want that and don't want to enter the NFL DFS cheat sheet. But looking at it, guys, so looking at it right now, Tutu Atwell, his over receptions on every single site is really high. So Fliff is the highest at minus 165. Bet Online AG is minus 156. Hard Rock Bet minus 155. And then the lowest one is going to be minus 125 on FanDuel. So across the board, this is a very good bet for us, guys. And personally, I don't really get why it hasn't been bumped. It's super strange that it hasn't. This is like one of those where if it doesn't hit, I'm kind of okay with that. And then Colby Parkinson as well. It's the exact same thing for him. Actually, he doesn't have as much of a lower floor, I guess, in his props, except for DraftKings has his set at minus 120. So a very clear edge that we are getting here. And again, I'm not really sure why this hasn't been bumped just yet. It's been there for quite some time. Heck, I had these on my Flex Friday video. Like, it's crazy. And let's just talk about these two a little bit more. Even if these do get bumped, as I kind of expect them to, like, we're still going to get some pretty big edges here. So the reason why that is because we look at Tutu Atwell had 90% of the snaps last week, 74% of the snaps the previous week. The expectation is that he is still going to see snaps. At the start of the season, I felt Tutu Atwell was the best handcuff to Cooper Kupp. That ended up being true. Now, 2 weeks ago, in week 3, I did say I thought it'd be Jordan Whittington getting more snaps over Tutu Atwell. We actually saw both of them just get a bunch of snaps in week 4. And I kind of expect that to continue. Colby Parkinson is still going to get a lot of work as well. This is supposed to be a high-scoring game as well. It has the potential to be a shootout. And so if that occurs, I do expect those two to be benefiting from that. Now, I expect Jordan Whittington to be the receiver number 1. But like, even when we look at their stats, like we see Tutu Atwell 2 straight games of getting this over when he's been in that more prominent role. You would argue, on pace to have it for 3 straight games, given the fact they didn't play that many snaps in that Arizona game. And so 6 targets, 5 targets, love that. Again, this game should be a little bit more high scoring. We look at Colby Parkinson as well. Colby Parkinson has been getting a decent amount of targets, 7, 6. That has been happening a lot for him as well. The one good thing about Tutu Atwell is he's had a few manufactured touches where they went out of their way to target him. Colby Parkinson is more the natural development of a play as well. One potentially concerning thing is that the Packers are going to be without Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. And the way I phrase that, or I phrase it that way because I could see this being a huge time of possession game where both teams just have long sustained drives. You take out Christian Watson, you take out Romeo Doubs, 2 guys that can be more deep shots for Green Bay Packers. Don't exactly love that. But on the Flex Friday video, I also mentioned that we were getting some pretty good prop bets really with Wicks and Tucker Kraft as well for their fantasy score lines. Those have been bumped and or pulled off the board. So we'll see if those get put back up. But obviously that was a pretty big edge on the Flex Friday video. But while we're here, I do want to mention Jordan Whittington as well. So as part of the game stack, I actually wouldn't mind Jordan Whittington to get over 4.5 receptions. At that point, though, for betting on that, I think we'd be better off just doing his fantasy score. But I really don't mind his over receptions either way. Like, still a decent prop at either way. Jordan Whittington, I just think he's going to have a good game. And so it's up to you guys to choose, I guess, which of those 2 that you would want to use. Maybe not all 3. But it's just a game that should be high scoring. So I want to be targeting that. Then that being said, we jump back into the full cheat sheet here for this slate of games. We also have Matthew Stafford to get a INT as well. I actually project to get like almost 1.45. So another decent stacking opportunity for us in that game. So a lot of decent edges there, a lot of ways to stack it. Hopefully you guys got in there from the Flex Friday video, but those are all good ones. Another good one that's being pulled in that I also like as well. That's the nice thing about this week, guys, is that a lot of the good prop bets that are being popped up and put in here are all prop bets that I decently agree with, which is nice to have. So one of those would be George Kittle for over his fantasy score of 10.5. The one concern that we have here with George Kittle is the fact that he has been a little bit banged up. Okay, that does concern me a decent amount. And the fact that everyone's healthy as well. Not the best matchup either, but it's a game that should be higher scoring. And George Kittle has looked good, has looked the part, but my one concern is that everyone is healthy. So you got Deebo Samuel back in this game, Brandon Ayuk's there. You got Juwan Jennings good to go as well. And really, this is a matchup that does promote more of a run script. So, like, I do agree with the over. Like, I'm not afraid to bet on this one, like some of the other ones that we've seen, again, earlier on this season. But I wouldn't say it's like a lock and load one. Garrett Wilson as well. Like, I'm kind of fine with this one. Don't feel like I need to go out of my way to target it, but also not a bad one. You know, you would argue he's due to have a better game. Going against the Minnesota Vikings, not a terrible game. Same thing with Keenan Allen. Like, again, Keenan Allen is someone that in week one had a bunch of work, got a lot of short and easy receptions. That did happen as well in last week's game, but that was it. That was his only production. It was kind of the only design plays that went to him. Rome Odunze has been looking better. He's going to be more involved in the offense as well. So a little bit of an annoyance there, I would say, but I don't mind this one. I'd be fine with this one. You know, that matchup against Carolina should be a good one as well. So he's going to be one more week healthy. From there, we got two bets that I assume are going to get bumped. Don't feel the need to go out of my way to target these ones. And then Jacoby Myers over 10.5 for a fantasy score. Okay, the projection data doesn't like it. The average sportsbook line clearly would have it at 10.5 or so as well. Underdog has at 11. The nice thing about a line like this on PrizePicks is that it is a 1-for-1 swap between PrizePicks and Underdog. So we can see Underdog's a little bit too high. You could maybe bet the under on Underdog. And now we're starting to get a little bit lower. We're not, above that 54% likelihood that we would like to have for a bet to hit. But let's talk about this bet line that we're seeing here between Demario Douglas and Jalen Polk. So I would argue that, yeah, one of these two are going to be a good bet here. And I say it that way because when we look at the snaps for those two, both of them have had a game in which they had over 80% of the snaps. And you would argue both of them have been the most impressive weapon for the New England Patriots on offense. Demario Douglas had 80% of the snaps in week 3. He didn't really get going in the game in week 4 until the second half of that game. Very annoying. Ended up with 3 receptions there. And then Jalen Polk did get a lot of work in that game, 83% of the snaps. Honestly, I'm not sure if they think they see something there or if it's more of a coach's decision. Obviously, Polk and Douglas are more small guys, whereas KJ Osborne, just like a steady, he should be on the field. He's like a receiver number 3. He's not bad. Tyquan Thornton, more of a deep ball threat. You know, in week 1, maybe they thought they saw something there. I don't exactly know. We've seen Austin Hooper get a bunch of work, which if you look at the snaps here, guys, my biggest takeaway is that we see Hunter Henry go to 78% of the snaps, Austin Hooper at 59%. And so I think the reason why these two were down a little bit is because we saw still the same amount of 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets, but also Tyquan Thornton didn't have that many snaps. So you actually saw Jalen Polk get the exact, basically get Tyquan Thornton snaps. And so if this is consistent, if we can actually lock in 60% of the snaps for Demario Douglas, and let's just say 60% of the snaps for Jalen Polk, then both would be bets that I like. Okay, Jalen Polk had 7 targets last week, only 3 receptions by even playing that much. And it is a difficult matchup. You would argue they've had kind of a more difficult schedule. Antonio Gibson is apparently starting here for the Patriots. I don't really care about that. I think Stevenson will still be the top back there. That is the way you attack the Miami Dolphins defense. But at the same time, Miami knows that. And Miami knows that they need to sell to stop the run. So, like, I'm kind of thinking that there could be some pass plays there. Then, yeah, Demario Douglas, guys, did not have anything going all of the game, throughout all the game. And then at the end of the game, 3 targets, 3 receptions. Like, that is a mistake. They're pretty vocal that they made a mistake in week 1 and week 2 about not getting Demario Douglas the ball. And then in week 3, he got the football. And so I kind of expected that to continue in week 4 as well, but it did not. And so I don't mind these. Actually, I could see myself potentially stacking these two together, maybe just betting on that game being a little bit better. And that would work with Jacoby Brissett over fantasy score. It's a little bit ugly there. I get it, but it's all right. One bet that's popping up, Greg Dortch for under 3.5 receptions. To me, this does correlate pretty well with Trey McBride being back. Last week, I actually really liked Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch for over the receptions. Only one of those hit, but the targets were there for Michael Wilson. Greg Dortch actually got the over, but wasn't as involved as I thought. But I do think with Trey McBride being back and active, that this bet does make sense. Another kind of good one that I would say correlates well with another bet that we're already on is Brandon Ayuk for his under 4.5 receptions. So this one, again, like if you are betting on George Kittle to get over his fantasy score, I would say this one makes sense as well. We typically do not see these two correlate together. If George Kittle's having a great game, Brandon Ayuk is not as likely, or Deebo Samuel. It's like typically 2 out of those 3. And so I don't mind that. Like, not terrible. Another one that we have that's decent, Cam Little to get under 7.5 kicking points. 3-point game. Could be a high-scoring game. Maybe. I don't know. I don't love that, but the offenses have been a little bit hit or miss. I don't know. That's a weird one. I could actually see more field goals attempted in that game. Bo Nix to throw an INT, 0.5. Bo Nix has been pretty bad. Raiders defense isn't terrible. I could see that one hitting there as well. Noah Fant under 2.5 receptions, 53.6% likelihood to hit here on PrizePicks. Not a terrible one. The thing with Noah Fant is his snaps have went down, and you actually saw AJ Barner get a lot of snaps, 40% of the snaps last week. They've been talking him up. If you guys watched that game on Monday Night Football, you heard the broadcast crew really going out of their way to compliment Barner, and that was because of really the Seahawks going out of their way to talk to them. I always, guys, if you ever watch film or watch those games, one of the biggest pieces of information that you can get that'll help you throughout the season is literally just listen to what the broadcast crew brings up as like key talking points. This was one of them. This is one of them that like, oh, little buzzer in my head's going off to make a note about that. And so I could get behind Noah Fant not getting that many snaps. Obviously, they've been going to a lot of 3 receiver sets. In some situations, we see Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker on the field together as well. And so I don't hate that. Actually, we've seen 4 receiver sets with Jake Bobo in there as well. So I don't hate that. Now, they are favored to win by 7 points as well. And so to me, that would only increase the likelihood of this bet hitting. So I actually really strongly like this bet. And so from there, let's just take a peek at some of the other prop bets that we were getting. Earlier on this week, I told you guys Tyler Conklin over 6 for a fantasy score was a good bet. That has since been bumped up 0.5, so not as big of an edge there. Narvison to get under 7.5 for kicking points. He's missed a field goal, I believe, in every single game. Very annoying as a Packers fan. So hopefully that trend doesn't continue. Again, that's a game that should be higher scoring. Don't exactly love that one. Pat Freiermuth to get under 3.5 receptions. Don't hate that one. He is someone that... it's just tough. The Pittsburgh offense is one that I probably just staying away from with Justin Fields. Like looking at the box score, I thought he was going to look really good last week on film, and it turns out that wasn't really the case. You would argue that his poor play was the reason that they are behind in that game last week. And so it is weird because he didn't look bad in the second half, but you don't forget about the first half. And so I don't know. It's probably just to stay away there with the Steelers. From there, Tyler Lockett to go over 3.5 receptions, I don't hate. Now, the snaps were a little bit lower last week than I would have expected. You look at that game against the Giants, it's going to be a game that they should be up. They're favored to win by 7 points, whereas last week it was the exact opposite. It was a more pass-heavy script. And so I do worry about that a little bit to the point where they might not need him to get going. Any other ones that are really standing out to me? Alan Lazard has been bumped slightly as well. I don't hate this. Like, it's not terrible as well, but don't need to go out of our way to target it. Deshaun Watson to get over 16.5 for a fantasy score is one that kind of stands out to me as well. So if we look at the average sportsbook line, they'd be giving us this line about 18 for a fantasy score. So that's off by, a decent amount, 1.5 or so. I'd be happy to run that one out to you. Someone that should be able to get going in this game. Great matchup against Washington, a pretty high scoring game. And guys, if you watch it, like, I know if you don't watch it, this is going to sound bad, but like Watson's looked good. There's no other way to put it. Like, he hasn't looked great, hasn't looked bad. He's looked above average, if you will. Maybe good's a little bit too strong, but above average, startable, serviceable, someone we should be going out of our way to target. And if Cooper wasn't playing so poorly, which I don't think he will this game, given this matchup, Watson would have got the over last week. And so I actually think this is a pretty strong one. He does have a little bit of a rushing floor as well. And so this is not a bad one. Another one that I want to point out more so for Underdog is the prop line difference for Christian Kirk. 10 for a fantasy score on Underdog is simply too low. And obviously there's a slight calculation adjustment going on here, but this is one that we're going to be running out on Underdog as well. And then just a couple more. Tyler Huntley for over his fantasy score on PrizePicks. Not exactly one that I love, but it is off. Obviously, last week he missed Tyreek Hill on a wide open touchdown. You give him that, he's going to hit that 50% of the time. So, did want to call it that prop line difference that we have there, and then from there, not that much that we have other than that. So, let's go ahead and give you guys a bet of the day for Prize Picks, and then we'll jump into Underdog. So here we go, guys. Looking at the Prize Picks bet of the day, I feel pretty good about the first four that we have going on here. And then I did toss in the correlated kind of stack that we can run out there that doesn't affect the payout, which is pretty huge. That's another annoyance with Prize Picks and Underdog, is that anytime you really have a strong correlation, they've really been bumping down the payout. And so this doesn't occur with this one. So I do like this a decent amount. Obviously, these ones, I'm not sure why they haven't been bumped. Maybe there's a lot of public money going in on these, to the point where Prize Picks is saying, I disagree with the public money coming in on that. Tough to say. Like, I don't know that. That would be interesting data to have. I might look into that. But based off the data that we do have, clear, strong bets, and it hasn't been bumped yet. So tough to say that it will. Then obviously I mentioned a bunch of other bets. If you guys don't like these two, maybe you do think this matchup with Arizona is super good. Brandon Ayuk's finally going to get going. And if Brandon Ayuk gets going, then George Kittle's not going to get going. And it is a tougher matchup for Titans. I get that. Touched on a bunch of other prop bets that you guys can use. Let's go ahead now and jump on into Underdog. So for Underdog, we are getting some more aggressive lines in regards to some of these fantasy score lines, and those are going to be some of the better bets that we have on the slate today. So let's look at it. Like Zach Ertz, when we use the calculation difference is off by 1 compared to Prize Picks. So again, that's kind of just one that we almost need to make. His snaps have been capped at about 65 or so percent of the snaps, and with them rushing the football a decent amount, with Daniels rushing the football a lot, like I think we would typically just be betting this under regardless. From there, Travis Etienne to get under 11.65 for a fantasy score, I'm kind of okay with that. Tanks Bigsby has been eating into his workload a decent amount. If Etienne is going to get this over, I would assume it's because he scores a touchdown. And so, like, I don't know, Tank Bigsby continues to look good, and they continue to get good looks as well. And maybe Bigsby just gets a little bit more work. Only 52% of the snaps last week for Travis Etienne. And so if that continues, if that trend continues, then yeah, it's going to be likely for Etienne not to get the over. Now, I will say, last week was a super tilting week with a lot of the under fantasy scores, where it's like, all right, this player isn't likely to score a touchdown. Basically, every single one scored a touchdown. So if you take, and I know saying this is a weird way to phrase it in some people's heads, but touchdowns are fluky. Touchdowns are typically not likely. Basically, if you took away the touchdowns for like every player, which again you wouldn't do, but all the under bets do hit then. So it was very tilted in that regard. What sticks out to me the most is like both David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs getting like 1 yard rushing touchdowns. That was annoying. But anyways, another one like Trey Sermon to get under his fantasy score. Trey Sermon is going to be starting in place of Jonathan Taylor. The thing with it is we saw this happen last year, and we actually saw Tyler Goodson get a decent amount of work as well. I know Sermon is like the more clear, like 1-for-1 swap between JT and Sermon, like their talent wise, but Tyler Goodson, I think, is a good running back. Now with Joe Flacco in there, I don't know if that hurts or helps the rush game, but it does help the passing game. And so it's tough. Like I would favor the under here. Like I get it. Another one, Nico Collins to get under his fantasy score. The thing that I worry about this game is that it is a high scoring game. Tank Dell's back. Again, the biggest reason why this is popping up is because it's clearly the outlier. You look at the Prize Picks line would be set at 13.75 using underdog scoring. The average sportsbook line does have it about 13.50, and the projection data has it at 13.76. So even though I don't like it, I can see why this is a good bet. I don't like betting unders on games that are supposed to be high scoring, but I can see why this is popping up. And so on Prize Picks, we saw like the board much better. On Underdog, we're going to be placing some bets that we probably don't love, and we just hope that these guys don't score touchdowns. Chase Brown, I don't want to mess with. Chase Brown, I still think will be in a 60-40 split with Zach Moss, with Chase Brown getting 40% of the work. But last week was the first week in which Chase Brown significantly looked better than Zach Moss. Zach Moss kind of looked slow at times, whereas Chase Brown looked good in between the tackles, was able to make defenders miss. That was probably Chase Brown's best game of his career thus far. And really, Zach Moss, maybe one of the worst in some time now. Zach Moss wasn't terrible. The nice thing about Zach Moss is that his roller coaster, if you will, it's this tiny. The little bumps that you're going over is that. So when he has a low, it's not that low. When he has a high, it's not terribly high. Whereas Chase Brown, it's a literal roller coaster. It's an up and down ride. Week 1, there is an egregiously bad run that he tries to like cut inside, run straight into a defender. If he bounces outside, scores a touchdown. Then last week, oh man, super good. So yeah, I'm just staying away from that one. Another kind of interesting one is Tyreek Hill for under his fantasy score, and this is one that would go well with the Tyler Huntley under fantasy score on Underdog. That would correlate. I would also argue you could do the exact opposite on Prize Picks because we are seeing some clear outliers between how the two sites are kind of valuing those two. But yeah, we do have Zach Moss for over 2.5 receptions as an okay bet that's popping up. I'm kind of okay with that. Deshaun Watson is a slightly better bet on Underdog at 16.25. That the difference between a couple yards can make a difference. So I don't hate that. Then we are getting some like tackles and assist props here that aren't being bumped down, which is pretty huge to me. And so I think these are worth calling out. So assist props, obviously tackles and assists, really not bad. I'm surprised that we're getting these right now. And so the issue with content a lot of the times is that a lot of the times prop bets will get bumped by the time I get out these videos. So it's super nice to see that these aren't getting bumped. I like this. You got TJ Watt there as well, so that's nice. Now, I do want to get into some of the Packers props as well. We got Wicks at 4.5 receptions. I kind of disagree with that. I think that's a good sportsbook bet. So if you guys are someone that watches this for traditional sportsbook content, I think that's a good bet. Josh Jacobs under receptions is being favored. I don't really agree with that either. Tucker Kraft, you could do his over receiving yards on Underdog. It's at 37.50, whereas on Prize Picks it's at 35 or 39.5. Like, I would agree with that over. Now, I do want to take a peek at this Wicks receptions line. I'm confused, honestly. Had a massive target share last week, and that was with Christian Watson getting injured. Now you take out Romeo Doubs. He's clearly going to be kind of the receiver number one in this offense, if you will, where obviously it's going to be Jayden Reed, but Jayden Reed sometimes doesn't get used in the traditional kind of receiver ways, whereas Wicks will. That's kind of what I mean by that. Reed will have more manufactured touches, whereas Wicks will just be more natural play development. And there's kind of two sides to this. Wicks should have had a bigger game than he had last week. There were some mistakes that he made that shouldn't have happened. Had a bad drop that would have been a touchdown. Had another play that he should have scored on where if he flips his head early, it's an easy catch. Ends up being an INT because he doesn't flip his head. And so there is two sides to it. Maybe there is a little bit of less trust that Love has, but he's going to be forced to throw him the football. So I don't really get this line. Bet the over 4.5 receptions on DraftKings plus 125 or 3.5 receptions. Just a good bet for us across the board. He's going to step up into a bigger role, and I don't really understand that one. Another one, let's take a peek while we're here. Tucker Kraft. This is one that I mentioned earlier on in the week for his over. 3.5 receptions. Still not a bad bet. I'm pulling this up because I do think it could be one that gets put back into Prize Picks or Underdog. And then if it does, would be one that I would want to target as well. It is on Underdog right now, but it's a reduced payout of like 0.87%. So no need to roll with that. So let's jump into the Underdog bet of the day here, and then that'll be it. Now, before we do that, just want to say thanks for watching this video, guys. If you can, and you're still watching this video, obviously you enjoyed it, make sure to give a thumbs up on the video. That just helps out a lot as well. All right, let's get into the Underdog bet of the day. And so looking at the Underdog bet of the day, again, just taking the under fantasy scores for some of these ones that are kind of clear outliers with how they're being valued, especially compared to Prize Picks and really the average sportsbook line. These are clearly a little bit too high. Really just bets on them not scoring touchdowns, which again, a little bit fluky, we know that, but more times than not, players not going to score a touchdown. So other ones that we're going to use are going to be these tackles and assist props, just because, well, they're there right now. And if they're not getting bumped, even at 53%, I don't hate the idea of targeting those ones. Those ones typically hit, I would say, frequently at their expected rate. So about 53% for all of those. Those are going to be all the best bets. Again, if you guys want access to any of the tools that you saw in this video,